Welcome to the Freedom CEO podcast. It's about becoming the chief decision maker over your life in order to step into a life of freedom. From business, health, wealth, charity, and giving back to just doing life on your own terms. I am your host, Sharon Ruddy. I am an award-winning activist, change maker, and a multifaceted impact entrepreneur with over a decade of experience in business, philanthropy, and health and wellness. In this space, I'm going to be bringing you insights, not just from me, but from incredible thought leaders around the globe to help you start making decisions towards living a life of freedom so you can live a life you love. Are you ready, guys? Because we are going all in. I have to say there's something so badass about sitting down with women who are successful to talk about money and finances and how we as women can be creating wealth. And so I am so excited today because I am bringing on two badass women who are the co-founders and wealth advisors of SB Group Private Wealth. Sharon Ruddy and Betty Hildebrand are passionate about empowering women to elevate their wealth. They believe that women deserve to have the same financial confidence and independence as men because, hello, we do deserve that. They believe that women deserve to feel heard and valued, that they deserve to have access to the knowledge and expertise that empower them to feel independently secure in their future. They have over 40 years of combined experience at some of the largest wealth firms in Canada, and combined with their extensive experience, along with their passion for helping women and families optimize, grow, and preserve their wealth. And they are here today on the Freedom CEO podcast to speak to you. I hope you enjoy. So today on the Freedom CEO podcast, I am so excited to welcome both Betty and Sharon to the Freedom CEO podcast to be talking about one of my favorite topics, women and wealth. Ladies, thanks for joining.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
So before we dive in, because we're so used to hearing men in finance, men in the money world, talk to us a little bit. Give me your backgrounds. Where did you guys both start out? And then how did you arrive to this point today?
This could be a long podcast, so we'll give you the short version of it. So we've both been in the industry for almost 25 years each, so 50 years together. But we both started off as advisors, and I think both of us a little bit unintentionally. We were looking at other careers and fell into this and absolutely fell in love with it. I know for myself, I took it as a summer job and ended up doing my designation, a month in for financial planning. So that turned into a lot of different jobs at the biggest banks in Canada and a lot of head office, sales at asset management companies. So I think we always say we've pretty much done every role at head office and out in the field in wealth management. So in the last job where we actually met, we were leading investment advisors.
Wow, very cool. So, okay, you guys have had an incredible journey in the financial industry, in wealth management. Why decide to leave something that you guys were very successful at, right? And as women, you would have really stood out in your industry as well. So why did you decide to leave and start what is known today as SB Group Private Wealth Management?
That's right. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the $1 million question. And I think when Betty talked about our backgrounds, I think one piece before we started working for those large, banks, we both had very entrepreneurial spirits. So I started when I graduated working for an entrepreneur. And I remember just that feeling of learning and seeing and all the things that were going on in that entrepreneurial world. And I know Betty had similar experiences. So even though we were working and growing our careers through those institutions, we still always had that fire inside of us. And I think along with many people, the pandemic happened. We got to a stage in our lives where we started thinking about what did we want for that next chapter, if you will, and how did we want to have an impact. And I think that drive for impact and the passion, and then coupled that with the opportunity we saw around women, right? We saw, despite best efforts, because, certainly we're making strides in those institutions to bring women into the fold more. We felt passionate. Sorry, I didn't mean to hit you. We felt passionate about the fact that there was an opportunity to do better. And we felt that with our experience, having done all those different roles in the industry, coupled with our passion for really elevating women around the wealth conversation, the stars aligned, so to speak.
And I think something that you just pointed out is that we were around a lot of men and we worked for some great ones, but the stigma was still there that, and we're not the only industry where women are still up and coming, and there's, we're still a bit of unicorns, and not in a fun way, in that there's not a lot of us in that industry.
No, I mean, so I'm so curious because it's very clear to me, and it would be the obvious that the majority of not only who you're working with as peers as men, but predominantly your clientele base that you're also working with is men, so you kind of get it like on both sides.
Yeah, right.
Out of like all of your clients, what would you say would be the percentage then that you were seeing women as clients?
So we didn't manage clients. At the beginning of career we did, but for the last, I would say 15, we were managing advisors and head office roles and strategies. But from our viewpoint, and this is why we sort of did leap into where we are right now, is we didn't see a lot of women being involved in those conversations. We didn't see a lot of conversations that women, it would be appealing to women to want to come in and have those conversations, even though these money decisions really determined the course of their future. And I think that's where we, like, when we say passionate and we're jumping out of our chairs, we wanted to get that information to women in a way that appealed and resonated with them and made them want to take action to do something better around their wealth and money.
Okay, so I want to set the stage a little bit because, I wanted you guys to come on the show specifically because we could talk about investment stuff and like wealth management and why you need it and all of these good and important things. But before you can really even dive into that, you need to have a foundation laid around finances, financial literacy. And when I met you guys as two women, I was like, oh my goodness, like you guys are that gap, right?
Right.
You guys are women not only on the other side in wealth management, but you're females representing what is possible and what is available to so many women that lack the confidence, lack the knowledge, lack the experience around how to not just invest, but just the basics, fundamentals around finances. And so I wanted to bring you guys on today to dive into some of why do you feel like there's still this stigma, but like this shame. I feel like a lot of women carry this shame that they either don't know anything about finances, never mind investing, or they have a shame that they're not where they think they should be in their life.
Right.
Whether they're 30, 50, or in their 70s.
Right.
Or they have this shame and embarrassment that they even have the desire to become financially literate, because that has been so taboo culturally across the world. This is one of those things that actually unifies women without them maybe even realizing it.
Well, and to your point, we're also ashamed to say we want to be wealthy. Right. It's like not the good girl thing to say. Our husbands could be wealthy, but we don't say that to each other. I think we do more now and say, we're here to make sure women are wealthy and they have the same strategies and tools and techniques and conversations that men have had all these years to help them grow their wealth.
Yeah. And I think, no, it's funny because I want to go back to the question you asked earlier about in our previous roles,
Yes.
the number of clients we saw that were women. And I think we had a lot of female clients. The difference and why we wanted to do this is because it's not that we didn't have female clients, but the conversations that they were having or not having because they weren't being included in it were not the kind of conversations that women were longing for to be able to better understand their wealth. And you talked about the shame aspect, but the reality is advisors in our industry, not all of them, but there was a lot of advisors who wanted to talk about the money. But what we talked about in our conversations, which we all agreed on, is like money is emotional and we have a money story. So it's not about the dollars and cents on the page and the return and all of that stuff. That serves a purpose and it's important. But what we do with women and what we found our female clients were seeking was someone who can relate to them on a different level. So understand, we always say we care about first and foremost the person before we care about what they have as it relates to their wealth. So we talk about emotional connection to money, our money stories. And that's when you start to be able to remove some of that shame for women. And now they start to think, okay, I want to be involved in this conversation. So it's coming at it from a different perspective. And that's, I think, what drove us to make the change we made and start out on our own and build this practice with that kind of foundational focus.
And I think what you said about financial literacy and shame is everybody thinks they should be able to do our job, even though we've been at this together for 50 years, but nobody thinks they have to know what their doctor knows.
Right.
But around financial literacy is like, I think as women, we're taking the power back that we can go to the doctor and, get a diagnosis, but then we can do our own research on how we want to go about that and about the information and the choices that we want to make for our bodies, our money, all aspects of our lives. And I think part of our give back is that we are trying to educate women so that they have a different foundation going into the money-making era of their lives, so that they're being able to make the same choices as their male counterparts. So we definitely, financial literacy is something that can be started on your own, but there's help out there.
Yeah. Okay, before we jump into that, because we're going to get into some nitty gritty and like tangible stuff that people can walk away going, yeah, I'm able to start moving the needle in this way.
Right.
Yeah.
You brought up money story. And I think for some people listening, they don't even realize that there is a money story or that they have one.
Right.
Or is it?
Right.
So I like sometimes getting really 101 on here. So in your words, like what is the money story? What is a money story?
Yeah. I mean, like I'll start with this one. I remember growing up with a mother who didn't work outside of the home, which is no problem with that, but she relied so heavily on my father for all her money decisions. And so my money story became one that I don't want to be dependent on someone else for my money choices. So that was always so it's funny because I ended up in this male-oriented business, right? It's almost like, and so it's funny when you can really take time to think about where do your money stories come from. I would say, growing up, I had my parents immigrated here, hardworking parents, but there certainly wasn't an abundance mindset. Right? Like that's something that I had to work over time to work on reframing my own money story to be one of more of a money mindset. And when we talk to women about their money stories and understanding that when you understand what your story is and where it came from, now you have the power to decide if that's the one you want to keep or if you want to create a new money story for yourself.
Yeah, a new narrative.
And that's what we did in our journey.
And I think we spoke to a woman once and she's like money story, and it sort of occurred to her, and it's usually our first experience with the conversation, either overhearing our parents or overhearing someone talk to money, and for some reason that sticks. And interestingly enough, her mother was an accountant who taught them not to talk about money. And she just said now, she works in our industry, but she feels like And I think a lot of us have this, is you don't talk about what you have or don't have. And I think we need to break down that barrier so that everybody stops thinking that the neighbor has it figured out and everybody has more than they have, or there's always sort of a lack of abundance mindset. It's that scarcity mindset around money.
So I think, simply put, and like the bottom line is we all inherit and we're predisposed to conditions around money that we're not even necessarily aware of.
That's right.
Even now, even if we have addressed certain things with money to try to heal our relationship with money or our money mindset, there's probably still things that you don't realize that happened when you were younger that have conditioned you.
Absolutely.
To how you approach money and your energy and your relationship with money right now. And that's what we want to break down. That's what we want to reframe that narrative, mostly if it's a negative one, but I think as a female, we've inherited that negative, predisposition without necessarily realizing it sometimes, because it's in all cultures. It was in all cultures and kind of in most religions, right? So whether, sometimes you got like a double whammy.
Yeah, for sure. 100%.
It's true.
And then you have your parents, teachers, and like influencers in your life growing up, that could be a family member that always had something negative to say about money, whether they were always broke and poor and therefore scarce, or they think that people with money are greedy and the root of all evil. How many of us have heard that? We've all heard that line, right? Like money is the root of all evil.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's so not true.
It's funny. I'm even having as we're talking, I'm remembering about these, and sometimes because Shay, you said it, we don't always know what we've inherited as it relates to our money story. But even as we're talking now, I remember being very young, and we were out, my mom and another mom and some friends, and we went into, I guess there had just opened a McDonald's in our area, and we walked in, and like I see all these people with their French fries and their burgers. And we were like, oh, can we have that? And my mom didn't have money with her. And so she said, they don't serve food here. We're just getting a drink. And I'm like, but I'm pretty sure I see all these people. But it was just that first time that somebody said, we don't have the money for that. Even something so simple. Yeah. And I was listening to something the other day. I can't remember. It must have been a podcast or something. And they were talking about that. Like the first time you looked at a toy or something and someone said, we don't have the money for that. Even though they may have, but it was like, and that was a message, like those little micro messages that built up over time. Yeah. And all of a sudden you're like, okay, well, I have this scarcity mindset around money, or I don't think there'll be enough. Or if it's so interesting when you think of those little stories.
And Shay, I don't know, I feel like, especially with Sharon and I just knowing each other's stories, her and I like heard a money story and we went in the other direction.
Yeah, exactly. We were like, no, that's not going to be money.
Yeah, and it's funny how it manifests itself, because you said that. I remember like my parents always saying that, like, you don't need that toy. You don't need that. They were same thing. Immigrants worked hard for their money, great people, but didn't really see the need for extras. And so I probably went in the other direction with my kids, where I was like, finally I was like, okay, you really don't actually need another stuffy, because 3 closets are full of them. So but yeah, it's interesting how we react, the psychology behind it.
Yeah. And we know this in like a business principle, and if you are like obsessed with personal development or like how to create success in your life, the leaders in the world, the greats on this topic, will tell you that the number one reason why you succeed or not is your mindset.
For sure.
We wholeheartedly believe that.
And so I apply that in the same thing to women when they're talking about wanting to get into investing. They want to start learning about how to become more financially literate. And it's like, you first need to address your money mindset. Like, what is your money story? And like, go back and thank the former version of yourself, the younger version, the older version that brought you here, and say, thank you for keeping me safe thus far.
Exactly.
Right? But it's no longer needed. I am safe and I'm ready to thrive. which means I need to outgrow, I need to shed this story and narrative and reframe it, because if not, you will most likely always fall into that similar cycle that you see yourself already in. And sometimes it's like that feast and famine cycle, right? Where you can make money, but it's not safe to hold it. And so it disappears almost as quickly as it comes in.
Yes.
Or you carry that I'm not worthy. Money is the root of evil. Money is dangerous to have. I shouldn't have it. And you're in this perpetual, like, that's the paycheck to paycheck cycle. That's the scarcity.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's what I suggest to people first is, address what's going on in your mind.
Yeah.
And then you can start to learn. And this is like where I would love to get into is like learn and get educated on how then to become financially independent, how to start creating that security and applying those principles to start thriving within your finances and to build wealth.
And I think that advice is probably sound and great for all aspects of your life, is to start with your mindset.
Yeah. Conversations like this just light me up. And I hope you're loving today's episode too. My friend, can I ask a quick favor of you? Could you please hit the subscribe or follow button? You have no idea how much that helps this show grow, so discussions like this can reach others as well. And if you want to go the extra mile, please leave a review. Your thoughts and feedback mean so much to me. After all, this show is created for you. Okay, that's it. Let's get back to it. Okay, so you guys are the experts in this. I want to have like a mini, I have never met you. I'm coming in before. You're seeing like, I'm very ABC, just getting in. Right. What would you recommend to somebody who needs to get the education, needs support, and wanting to create financial independence? Is there maybe like 3 things that they should start to consider that they could start doing?
I mean, I think first and foremost, make sure you find someone you can trust. Because if you're going to be talking to anybody, whether that person's going to be giving you direct advice or whether they're going to be guiding you in different directions for you to seek out your own advice, you have to feel comfortable and confident with the person who's going to be taking you on that journey and going alongside you on that journey, perhaps. So trust, I think finding someone you trust, number 1.
Yeah, and I think being vulnerable enough to ask a lot of questions. There's a lot of technicalities in our business. We have a lot of lingo and acronyms. And I think that's, those basics you can find by Googling of like, everybody says RSP and TFSA and RESP. Just taking a little bit of time to really, find out what those mean. Because they sound like technical terms, but if you do a little bit of research, it's not rocket science. I think back to men in our businesses, advisors before the internet held the power in terms of information. Now information is out there. So just like the doctor scenario is like, here's my diagnosis, here's my options, tell me about these things. So I think doing a little bit of self or homework before you start to go in to see somebody, I think would help your confidence as well, and trying to understand, what options are for your money when you're starting out.
For sure. And I heard this the other day, and now I can't remember where I heard it, but it makes sense. It's know your numbers. So what that means is just take some time. Like, what's your income? What is your typical annual increase in income? What are your expenses? You don't have to have a detailed budget. I don't personally like budgets. I don't have a personal budget down to, some people love them, but I don't want to itemize like how much I spent on dinner last week. But I know how much my discretionary expenses tend to be, what my income is, what tax bracket are you in? How much should you be saving on an annual basis? What are the major purchases you might want to be making, and how much approximately do you want to allocate for those? Start to know your numbers. The more you get comfortable with those important critical numbers, the easier it's going to be for you to figure out what strategies you need to implement. And I don't know why, but for some reason, we forget that we need to know those numbers. So there's lots of numbers in our business. Some of them are more important than others, but take some time to do a little bit of an inventory on what are my numbers that I need to know, what's important. And that's where you can seek out some guidance from someone you trust to be able to talk about that.
Yeah.
And even if and that's where the vulnerability that you just spoke to comes in. But let's say somebody says, okay, well, here's what I make and here's what I want to do. And maybe they might be feeling insecure about the fact that their income is not going to be sufficient enough to get them. Well, guess what? There's things we can do to like, you have choice. And I think that's one of the driving principles around our philosophy of working with people, women in particular, is to say, the more you know about money and the different choices you can make, that those choices equal freedom.
Right.
And freedom is, you asked us earlier about one of the things that we left behind. And we had this interesting conversation once where we were leaving behind a lot of security. And I remember having was with a personal coach that I was working with. And I was saying, I want security and freedom. And she said, Sharon, those are two different things. You have all the security in the world. You don't necessarily have the freedom. Right. And so that was like my aha moment. I went, okay, that's a good point. But right now I'm
on that journey, which is funny because it's the first time in our lives that we don't have the security. We leapt into freedom, but now that security's come back. Yeah. So I think, our lives are journeys in every aspect of them, but financially you do have to sort of, we have to start bearing it all and start looking at things. There's always a month where you don't want to look at every purchase on your credit card. Totally. But you have to, those are the small habits, I think, especially for women, is we have to stop being ashamed because we spent this on this, And if you don't feel good about it, well, we know next time not to do that then, right? Mm-hmm. So, and again, it's the forgiving ourselves for not knowing how to make those choices. And I think, back to look, I love the know your numbers in all aspects of our lives. Is the same thing. I don't love budgets, but I have a very good handle
Except
of what
for my age. I'm trying to forget that one now. Remember, we don't always need to know.
We're going to age gracefully. But I think even with that is like just being vulnerable to look at what things really are. And I think one thing Sharon would say, and I think that this is, we come across a lot, is like, I make $100,000. I make $100,000, especially new kids getting out of school, they're getting these jobs. But what does that really mean? Like, not exact science, but that's $50,000. So if you go buy $100,000 car, you can't pay that off. And I think those are, really understanding, like, tip one is everybody needs to look at their pay stubs and say, like, what do I actually make as an income? And take inventory on that. So that would be like, step one is what am I bringing in?
So you guys know I recently hosted a workshop that was called The Audit, The Path to Financial Empowerment. And in the audit, I talk exactly about this, in that in order for you can't go somewhere if you don't know where you are right now. Right. And needing to do a full audit and get really clear on what your numbers are.
Oh, maybe it was you that told us to know your numbers. I know we're telling you your own, because I heard it somewhere and I was like, that's brilliant. And Shay, it was you telling us that at lunch.
So funny. That's so funny. But okay, I love it. I love how this just like totally came like
recently.
But it's so important. It's so vital, because you can dream all day long about wanting to be somewhere, but if you don't know where you are, you actually can't build that roadmap to get to where you want to be. And, I've shared this story recently a few times, because I think it crystallizes the point that oftentimes we think we're somewhere completely different than the reality of where we are. And, I was doing a listing presentation. I may have even shared this story with you guys. And the wife was taking me through the home, married, and, they had lived in the house for 20 years. And so when we were going through the house, I'm asking questions. She's telling me about the renovations. We go downstairs in the lower level into the basement. I'm asking about the furnace, the hot water tank. And I say, is it rented or owned? And she's puzzled, and she looks at me and she goes, I don't know. And I go, here's a woman, for 20 years, they've lived in that house, and there's potentially an expense that leaves their account every single month.
Yes.
between $100 to $250. And it's possible that they own it and there's $0 that leave their account every month.
Right.
But the point is that she actually didn't know.
Right.
Yeah.
And so there's so many people, not just women, but there's so many people that actually live in that. I'm not clear. I'm not certain. I think I'm here.
Yeah.
When in reality, they could be somewhere else. And if you're wanting to become financially literate, you've got to start to have that relationship with your money, and also like the respect, like you just brought up earlier. And I love this, that if your spending habits, and women, I think are, I don't want to say we're worse than men, because men just spend on stupider stuff, you know? That's what I think. Like, sorry guys, but it is kind of true. You know, guys will go like blow money on like junk food at the gas station. Go to Costco and get that in bulk and like say,
Right.
Oh my God, why'd you spend that? Whereas like, you know, we as women will go spend it on other things, but we'll justify it. It's totally justifiable.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But to your point, there's at the core, there's this guilt that like, I shouldn't be spending this, but I really want it. So I do it anyways. And actually like inside of the audit, I actually go through all kinds of expenses, like basically every expense you can think of. And I do a column where it's pain, like it's hurtful to pay that every month. Maybe it's a rent payment, maybe it's a loan repayment, and it's like painful. There's also a guilty column.
Right. Oh, I like that. Yeah.
I bought another pair of shoes that I really don't need, but they're slightly different than my other 18th black pair of shoes. So I like bought them. And then there's a pleasure column. Like for me, I with pleasure will spend money on my coffee out. Like it is it is a gift to myself. Whereas for other people, they would be like, that might be a guilt. But like the point is I really believe that money is energy.
100%.
So it holds a frequency. And so when we feel pain versus gratitude, and you know, it's like when we reframe that pain point of going, how grateful am I that I actually have a rent payment to make, because that means I have a house over my head.
Exactly.
I rate thank you on all my bills.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you for this bill. Yes.
Thank you. You know, and the guilt, that should get eliminated, because it's in a way, it's very disrespectful to your money. And that sends out
100%.
a message that is the frequency that you're giving out. And you're also going to get that back, you know? So I do really believe strongly in that, and starting to heal and develop a newfound respect for your finances and building that relationship. Right.
And I think one of the things that we always say to all of our clients, but I think in particular it resonates with women, is, you know, they could have had this money with an advisor at a bank or at an independent, and it's invested like this,
right?
But they don't understand the purpose. So to your point of like, you know, is this my next Prada bag? That's my purpose for this, and I will invest it according to my timeline and what I want to invest it for. But this is my cottage money. In 5 years, I want this money to down payment on a cottage. Here's my retirement. And here's the purpose of the retirement. Here's what I want retirement to look like. Here's the things my family and I want to do for our retirement. And that is a very different purpose. And I think if you're going out and you're working with an advisor, you want to make sure you understand why you're invested the way you are for the different purposes. And I think so if you're doing that unpacking of like, here's what I spent, here's what I make, back to know your numbers, is what are your intentions? Right. Because how we invest you, or how you should look at your investments for that first column, is vastly, vastly different than what you have the capacity to do in the other bucket. So I think putting purpose behind what you're doing in investments is something that you have to look at when you're doing that unpacking. And we always say to our clients, you know, the financial plan gets uncomfortable because we're literally putting it all on the table, and everything in your life is transparent. But then we put it back together in a way that you know you can sleep at night, because you know the next step of the way is coming and it looks like that. And if life should, you know, hand you this, which as women we know life likes to hand us things when we least expect it. But this is the choices I get to make. And so that's when it always comes back to sort of our purpose is we want to empower women and give them information about their money and their wealth so that they know what choices they're going to make should A, B, or C happen, or if they want A, B, or C. So it's, really getting purposeful and having that conversation with yourself is like, what do I want more? Am I willing to risk my retirement for the next product bag? That's my choice to have that discussion with myself and my family to say that. And maybe that's not a choice I have to make. Maybe we figure out how to do both. And I think that's something we love as balance is, stop the shame of wanting to have nice things, but understand what your end goal is.
I think the purpose thing is very important because number one, it's one of our core values. When we talk to people about their money, we always talk about what's the purpose for this. But I think what it does as well, Shay, is it takes away what you said about the energy of money and that intimidation factor of money. So when you start to talk about purpose, because people think of money and it's a thing. And it's funny because I grew up where money had a lot more physicality than it does today, right? Like we would get if we were going to the store and someone gave us $1, back then there were dollar bills.
Yes.
Like you knew when it was running out because you maybe had 25 cents left. You had one coin left and you were like, okay.
And a chocolate bar were 35 cents left with $1. I still have 30 cents for next time.
I'm getting low on money. Like our kids are growing up in a generation where I don't know if they've ever seen the physical, the physicality of bills, unless they go to the US and they're using some US dollars and my daughter just took 400 with her on her trip. But that might be the first time she ever had the physical dollar bills. But what I mean by that is that you said money is energy, and it is energy even more so today than ever because, it's in our phones, it's, you don't ever see the money per se. But to Betty's point, when you start talking about purpose, all of a sudden the money piece starts to fall away and you don't give it as much power because now it's about what are these purposes that I have, these intentions I have, and then money just becomes the means to the end, like the vehicle to get those things done.
As opposed to the thing.
Exactly. But one thing I wanted to mention, because I think it's one of our favorite books around money, and you'd think we're going to come up with some book that's all about, the best way to invest in this and that. But one of our favorite money books is called The Having. And it's all about how you spend and how you put the right energy against those things. And I would recommend anyone who isn't sure about their money story, read The Having, because they'll start to be able to figure that out. And
it really talks about everything that you're saying, though, is like when your money mindset really does, and I think all three of us would say this, like you manifest what you think and what you believe. And if you look at something and it makes you happy, then it's the having, right? As opposed to, are you making a decision rushed and not in a positive space and because you feel like you have to? That's a very different energy that you're giving off into the money and to the object.
No, I could not agree more. I'm also going to put in the show notes. So if you are interested in the book, we'll include that because I think that's fantastic and will be a really good resource for a lot of people. Okay, kind of staying on this, I want to ask you, there's so many different things that you can invest in, right? Like there's stocks, there's bonds, there's REITs, there's real estate, there's NFTs, like if you consider that an investment, there's Bitcoin, there's all kinds of avenues, okay, we will say. When you think about investing in alignment, with your values and purpose, what does that mean? And how then do you choose what to put into your portfolio or what to invest?
Yeah, I think there's so many things that we could talk about, but I think it really starts and purposeful again. So I'll give you a very, simple example is if you're looking to create a monthly income, then maybe you look at investments that are called monthly income funds or, a stock that pays a monthly dividend and it has a history of that. So I think that's where you start your research. If you're looking to grow and you want to do that in a prudent way, so because it's your retirement or you're saving for your house, you need to investigate things like, mutual funds, ETFs. They give you for people that are starting out, they give you some security because you're not just buying one stock. So if one stock should disappear overnight, you're not out of your money. But if you and your 6,000 best friends go buy a basket of stocks, then you have, if one should go out of business or go bankrupt or whatever, or the stock price goes down, you have all those other baskets that you're able to lean on. So, and then you think about cost, like, do I need to do this in a mutual fund? Or is what I'm solving for going to be solved with an ETF, which are lower cost? So I think, the more complexity that you put in, costs are associated with that, but there's great places to start. Then there's something we call the Vegas account. So, if you want Bitcoin, that's not a long-term strategy for us.
Right.
But, the Vegas account, we always say, if you win and you do well, then maybe you have a boat for your cottage. But if you don't, we still have the cottage because we're invested this way. So back to the purpose and the investments associated, it still has to align with what you're trying to do. And that's a very basic answer for it. But again, it's cost, it's what you need at the time. The more money you're growing, the more purposes you have to look at those individually as well.
And I think just to add to that, the piece around the values, because asking about the values piece, there's a lot of products out there and solutions out there that's why it's important to get to know the person you're working with. So we ask a lot of questions about our clients and get to know them, so we understand what their values are, and then you can make choices, whether it's socially responsible investing. We actually have a fund, it's an ETF that we use with some of our clients that is a women's leadership focused ETF. So it actually happens to be, they're blue chip, US companies for the most part, but they're companies who've made a concerted effort to have certain leadership milestones and markers within the firm that they can say that they are supporting women in leadership. So those are the things that, if that's a values-based decision that a client wants to make, we can still get them the growth they're looking for, exposure to the capital markets they're looking for, but yet be mindful of what their own personal values. So those things can be harmonious.
Okay. I love it. I think it's just so important, you never want to do anything that doesn't align with your beliefs, with your values, and with your purpose. And I say this all the time. There are so many ways to make money. It's endless. Money is made up, number one, right?
Exactly.
So why do and invest or spend your time in areas that just doesn't resonate with you? That's just simply put, so you guys sharing that.
And I think if I have one piece to add to that,
please,
is and back to our our money stories or narratives that we have or things that we heard, I think that you need to take your advice not from someone who you think is wealthy and did well. I think you need to take that advice from your own research and making your decisions about what you want, and then looking to a professional to confirm the research and what you believe to be appropriate for yourself. And I joke, or we joke with our clients, is we're in this relationship and we're trying to understand you. But if your cousin's sister's hairdresser's taxi driver is involved in this conversation, it's losing the integrity of what we're putting together.
I can relate from a realtor standpoint.
Yes.
I know I'm saying that on the podcast. I'm kind of saying it as if that's off the record, but it's on the podcast. So yeah, especially now more than ever, because when I first started in the industry, that was still a reality, but now everybody's a realtor,
Right.
It's true.
I very much understand. I concur. It's very good advice.
Yes.
But in all seriousness, it is, even when you're looking at real estate, when you're looking at investments, you're making some of the largest financial decisions in your life that you're ever going to make. And so the expertise behind the person you're receiving that information from matters.
Absolutely.
And it's the worst reason to choose somebody because you're going to offend them or hurt their feelings,
for sure.
or they're a family or a friend. It's take them out to dinner then and there's other ways.
Exactly.
Don't put that in the Vegas bucket, okay?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes,
That's
yes.
right.
Yeah.
It's like, don't put that in the Vegas bucket. Just
Right.
take them to Vegas. Take them to Vegas with the money you've made from the investments that you brought in.
Exactly.
To do that. So
that are still there.
Yeah, exactly.
Regardless of the market conditions. And that's probably relevant right now to have this conversation this week.
Yeah.
So okay, in kind of like closing, and I feel like I could talk to you guys like forever, right?
Same.
Topic. I love sitting with you guys. I want, like, we're in such a unique time in history where we are seeing the largest transfer of wealth that's ever going to be taking place. And that does mean that a lot of women are going to be coming into money, whether it's coming even from the baby boomers and they unfortunately have their partner who's passed away before them that's older and women are receiving that money, or it's going down to their children. Whatever the reason is, we are seeing for the first time really ever in history where a considerable amount of money is coming into the hands of women.
Yes.
We are also seeing on the other side this rising appetite, this rising desire, where these conversations birth more and more permission come out that like you're allowed to want to be wealthy, you're allowed to want to create your own wealth, even within your household with your partner. You can still create your own. And I always say, when you are independently wealthy and strong, you show up in your relationship better, stronger, and you're a better contributor to that relationship as well, right? So all these things we're seeing, whether it's from the top being transferred down, but you're seeing this rise that's coming up.
Yes.
What changes are you guys seeing in the industry, or where do you feel that we still really need to go to like bridge this gap so that like more women can be winning, that more women
just share a statistic, and then 90% of women will be the controller of finances and money in their lifetime, whether by decision or otherwise. So to just back up your point, is right now is a very pivotal time. So.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, all those things you just mentioned, Shay, are absolutely going on. It's sort of like, you see the shift in how money and wealth is being transferred. One of the things, and that's a whole nother podcast, but one of the things that we really start to talk to women about a lot more nowadays is because women are coming into more of that wealth, and sometimes it is through an inheritance and different circumstances, but strategies to make sure that they're protecting that wealth.
Right. Yes.
Right. Because and that's a big conversation for another time, but we do talk to a lot of women about that. Like, what are the things they need to know, whether they are inheriting money, getting into a relationship, and there's two financial partners coming together, all of those different things. There's lots of strategies and lots of conversations we're having that I think is different than what their other advisors are having with them. So I think that's one of the things that sets us apart a little bit. Like, we're willing to have those conversations with them, and sometimes those conversations are uncomfortable, but oftentimes they're just dialogue and conversations, and it's once again just giving them more knowledge and power and choice as they do start to come into some of that wealth, as you mentioned, that's being
absolutely
transferred.
There's a lot of missing information, and we feel, I wish we could just by osmosis give it to most women, because to Sharon's point, there's just so many conversations that people don't even know that they have to have.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're definitely going to have a part 2.
Yes.
Everybody listening will agree. They're going to be like, we need more. We want more. So I need to have you guys on the show again, because you're on the Freedom CEO podcast. I want to ask you both a question that I ask pretty much everybody. You both are the CEOs in your business, you're co-founders together. And you know what it means to be a CEO in your business. But when you think of being the CEO in your life, of your life,
wow,
how has that brought you freedom?
Oh, wow. That's a big question. It's a good one.
It's a good one. Given your timing too, is It's funny, and I'll just share this personally, is, we're all searching for something, I think, as we are younger, and, we want to know what's going to give us that satisfaction or what we're looking for. And I think it changes, but right now I remember journaling is like, I never thought it would be peace, right? So I was always out there and wanting to do stuff, and I had a chance to really reset this weekend. And I think, when you can control your mindset, or you work on your mindset and yourself, you can bring anything that you truly desire, and it will come to you into existence. And I think to say my life is completely different is an understatement since we've made these choices. So being a Freedom CEO has brought me so much more, but definitely peace.
Yeah, I would say for me that, when I think of the Freedom CEO, it's a fantastic title and great question. And I think Betty alluded to this, but working in the corporate world for as many years as we did, and we had a lot of responsibilities, a lot of clients and advisors and all those things, and had to make a lot of decisions all the time. And I know that my decision-making skills were always pretty good when I was making decisions around business. But I think the Freedom CEO and being able to be in control of my life, and I think this comes with a little bit of age and experience, but now I'm much more comfortable making decisions from my intuition and making the decisions about my life from a place of what resonates with me and what doesn't. And that is, to me, the Freedom CEO, is that I get to make decisions now from my core, my values, my instincts. And I don't necessarily know that was something that was always, an option for me.
We trained it out of ourselves.
I love that. That resonates with me so much, because I think one of the most powerful knowings that you can ever have is being able to trust yourself.
100%.
Right. And that's what that is. And being able to hear your intuition, because that's hard for a lot of people, but to be able to hear it and recognize it, and then be affirmed in that is such a powerful thing. So I love that. Well, ladies, Sharon, Betty, thank you so much for being on.
Thanks for having us.
Such a pleasure.
Yeah, it was can't wait for part 2.
Yeah, me too.
Amazing.
It was so hard to click end on our conversation today with Sharon and Betty. It was so good, and it's so important. I hope you loved it the way that I did. And if you were listening and you wanted to get your hands on the resources that we mentioned in today's episode, you can click the links in the show note for the book, The Having. And also I will give you access for the replay to the audit, The Path to Financial Empowerment. It is a workshop that I hosted that also comes with a 26-page workbook that you can go through at your own pace at any time. And it's going to bring you so much value, and it's going to help you get really clear on where you're at, knowing your numbers, doing your audits, so that you can start to build your life around your financial freedom and create your wealth. I'm so excited for you. Thanks for tuning into the Freedom CEO podcast. If you got value out of today's show, I would love for you to leave a review, as it will help my show reach other people as well. You know what to do. Download this episode, click the like and subscribe button. If you feel like spreading more love, hop over to Instagram and share today's show in your stories. Remember to tag Shane Vidiata and the Freedom CEO. My DMs are always open, so drop me a line. I'd love to connect. Until next time, keep owning your decisions to live a life of freedom. Live a life you love.